Trauma Therapist Podcast, episode 329. Welcome to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. My name is Guy McPherson. My mission is to raise the awareness of trauma and to help support and inspire new trauma workers through this podcast and my membership community, Trauma Therapist 2.0. Thanks so much for joining me today, and here we go. All right, guys, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. Super excited to have as my guest today, Rivera Walter. Ili, welcome.
Oh, hi. I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
All right. So Ili is a licensed marriage and family therapist. She also holds a PhD in marriage and family therapy. She's a supervisor, professor, a mentor, and a wellness warrior for mental health professionals. Her area of expertise is systems theory, including self of the therapist, family of origin, relationship and intimacy theory through dialogue, and the integration of Christian faith and counseling. Ili, obviously, that's just you in a nutshell. I know there's a lot more, but first off, let's share with our listeners where you're from originally and where you're calling from, and let's do it.
Sure. So originally, I am from Puerto Rico. That's where I was born, and I lived there for about 5 years, and then my dad joined the Army, and so I grew up all over. I am right now in New York. And I've lived here for about 2 weeks.
Wow.
So my family and I just went through a major move from the South Florida area to this area. And I'm very excited to be located here.
Okay. Can we ask why you moved?
Yes, I accepted a full-time professor position for Nyack College in their marriage and family therapy master's program. And they have a main campus at Nyack, but the program is moving to Manhattan, and so I will be teaching from the Manhattan campus.
Nice. Congratulations.
Thanks so much. Yeah, really looking forward to it. Yeah.
All right. So one of the things we do here is start out with sometimes a quote, a sentence, a mantra, whatever, something to kind of set the stage. Do you have anything?
What comes to mind is a recent blog post that I wrote that I titled On Letting Go and Living Forward. Mm-hmm. And I think that living forward really has resonated for me. I'm not sure how that happened or came about as I was titling that blog post, but those two phrases together really have resonated for me, letting go and living forward. So that's what popped into my mind when you said that.
So we'll break it down a little. Why? Yeah. What does it mean to you?
I think, if I think about it in the large sense, that is life, really, right? I mean, life is a process, and not that I have lived it completely, of course, because I'm still here, but it's a process of, seeing, evaluating, letting go what needs to go, and taking that next step forward, whatever that means, metaphorically and also literally. So for me, I wrote that recent blog post because of the transition from living in Florida to knowing that I was moving to New York City, and what that meant for me, and how that really was a prime example of letting go and living forward, and what I needed to release and look forward to and embrace in that transition.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, I typed that out here as you said it, and just looking at it, I think it's one of those phrases that seems so easy, it's something to aspire to. It's, I don't know, for me, it's hard. And I guess for a lot of people too, but just, it's hard to let go. And there's so much wrapped up into that. I guess just as more of context, I kind of learned about what you were doing, and you have your own, and we'll talk about this later, but you have your own kind of online community for therapists, which is really cool. So I want to talk about that, but let's kind of dive in and hear the story about how you got to this place where you're a wellness warrior for mental health clinicians, what that means, and everything around that. So,
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I had the privilege of going to a master's program in marriage and family therapy, where the program was designed to require, I was going to say help, but really it wasn't to help therapists. It was to require therapists to evaluate their own past, in particular their families of origin. And it was a marriage and family therapy program, so of course there was that alignment between what the therapist had to do in the training and what they were going to help others do through the process of therapy. And so from the beginning of my therapist journey, I had this experience of being a therapist, meaning that I had a context for myself, my own experience, and also for holding the experience of those who I love most, those in my family of origin. That's what it is for me. Of course, that's not true for everyone, but it was and continues to be for me. So, so then I graduated and I worked for several years. A lot happened. I chose to do a PhD. I started a private practice, and I specialized in couples therapy. And so from the time I graduated until then, it was probably like 8-9 years when I became a mom. And I had been in practice for a while. I was writing my dissertation, and again, a lot was going on. But when I became a mom, I experienced this shift, and I'm sure a lot of moms go through this. But for me, I really began to think about what I wanted for, my child, for myself, and the mother role, and what it meant to be in private practice, and if that was the right thing for me. And I was in this also pivotal point in my business in which I was either going to go full force into growing it even more, or I was going to stay where I was. And so I took some time to really listen to what it was that was happening, because I started experiencing frustration with going to see clients in the evenings in particular, and I just started having these unexpected emotions around my work and what it looked like at the time, what it involved at the time. And I took some time to really start listening, because I was back in private practice 3 months after I had my daughter, not full time, but I was working. And so it took some time. It took me about 1.5 years to come to any sort of decision, or to feel that the answer had come to me. And the answer was that I needed to close my private practice. And so I did. That took about another 6 months. So really from the beginning of noticing what I was feeling around my work to closing my practice took 2 years. And so going through that experience, I really wanted to be there for therapists when life happens, So I learned, during that time I was researching, are there therapists that can help me figure this out, who have gone through major life changes, who understand how to evaluate, their personalities, their histories, their work, their business, and what's next for them, and how to come to some sort of understanding of all of that, and give it time to come together. And I just had a hard time finding others who could really support me through that. So I took my experience and I thought, okay, well, let me see what I can offer therapists who need support, therapists who don't want to just think of themselves as therapists, but really want to be in the world as human beings. And they just really happen to do therapy for a living. Or maybe they don't even want to think about what they do of therapy as something they do for a living. Maybe they have a bigger, don't know, idea or vision for how to describe their work.
That's me.
Yeah.
I'm going through that too. That's, as you were talking about that, I'm like, wow, that sounds so awesome, and I could really benefit from that. Yeah, no, and I think that sounds so exciting. Before we kind of unfold that a little bit more and unpack that a little bit more, Illy, what
Sure.
was it about this family of origin thing that I don't know? I guess I should say, how did that impact you?
Like originally, or when I was going through the business shift?
Well, kind of all along. I mean, what about that was important to you or significant for you?
That's a great question. I don't really believe in coincidences. I'm a person of faith. And so I come from a place in Puerto Rico that is called, the translation in English is manna. And it's called that because, there's a lot of connection to history and God and how we define God, of course. And a lot of just living on faith, And so I always was really interested in that history. I was always, even as a child, really fascinated by my family story, the people who had passed, and I would spend hours talking with my grandfather on his front porch about family members and his parents. And so there's no coincidence that I ended up in marriage and family therapy. And so in the program, the theory that was used to help us evaluate our histories was Murray Bowen. And it just really resonated for me. The first class on the first day, the way the professor spoke was the way that I thought. And I knew immediately, like, this is where I belong. This is my thing. This is going to be my thing. I knew it right away. And so that being said, I was ready to do what I had to do. And so the process required me facing my parents and patterns, right? So if you do a traditional genogram, you should do at least 3 generations. I did, I think, at least 4. And I trace patterns specifically of the women in my family. And at the time, my paternal great-grandmother was still alive. So I had the benefit of having, many generations to talk to. And my family, I learned through this process, was very open and willing to have honest conversations and tell me their stories. And I carry that with me. As you can imagine, the impact of that is profound. It roots you in not only your life story, but it helps you understand that your life story is so connected with the life stories of the people who chose to bring you to life, essentially. And so, yes, go ahead.
Well, I was also going to, I love this. And also, how does that then, or how is that important for you as a clinician? How does that manifest? How does that play out?
Great question.
Or not?
Yeah. So one of the things that I talk with clients about, and when I say clients right now, I mean therapists as clients, is that what it does for you is it frees you. It gives you this level of self-awareness, where one of the things that I noticed, or that I attribute to this process, because I was not a therapist ever without having gone through this process. Again, this was very much at the very beginning of my training. But I attribute to the family of origin exploration my ability to see problems coming from very far away, from very far off. So being able to kind of notice things before they have an impact or before they catch me off guard. There are the exceptions, of course, but it has allowed me a self-awareness that has helped a lot in just my life in general. In terms of being a clinician, I firmly believe that you can't help others do what you haven't done. You can't, not that you have to have walked through their shoes, in terms of how they're presenting problems, but it's much more difficult to sit with someone and not lead them, not advise them, not suggest things, truly hold presence if you haven't had to face your own anxiety or moments of really difficult conversations. And that's what having those conversations with your most significant others does for you.
Yeah. One of and I think we had talked about this previously in a different context, but one of the things that I love talking about, and really has come to fruition from doing this podcast and in these interviews, is the role of the therapist, the trauma therapist specifically, and how not just being authentic, but what does it mean to cultivate that, and what role does owning one's story, exploring one's story, whether trauma is involved in that or not, and how the degree to which one is able to do that, how does that impact the therapeutic relationship? So as you're talking, you're talking about exploring the roots that go down for generations and generations, and I can just feel how that would in turn impact and influence in a profound way just how you are, or how one can be in session with someone else.
Yes, I've experienced it personally, but I agree with you in terms of the story, that until you really looked at your story, all of it, and I don't only mean your personal individual story, but your family system's story, you don't fully understand yourself, and you can't fully help another face their story, because you'll have walls where your walls are. If you aren't willing to look at a part of your story, then you won't be able to help a client look at that same part, the tough part, or whatever, metaphor you want to use for that. It's only in seeing the whole picture, really, for yourself and in your own life, that you can allow that, facilitate that, hold that for other people, whether in therapy or out of therapy.
So in terms of, I just want to remind everyone that I'm speaking with Ely Rivera Walter. You're right now, you're a professor at Nyack College. You have this online presence at Family Therapy Basics, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And let's talk a little more about how the work you're doing there. What specifically are you doing? Who's your kind of ideal client? Who would come to you?
Sure. Well, I sort of, as you said, I call myself a therapist, mentor, and wellness warrior. And I would say that, my ideal client is the therapist who really, it's twofold. The therapist who wants to go through this process for themselves, through this family of origin exploration, and really have a big shift in the way that they live out their life, and they want to see how that can impact their clinical work. So that's really on the more supervision, mentoring side. And then there's the other side where therapists are ready to really integrate who they are into their business life, like I did, when I became a mom, and I said, okay, the way that I'm living out my business and my work life isn't aligning anymore. It did for a time, but it doesn't anymore. And then that's when I started growing Family Therapy Basics and developing an online presence and really building the lifestyle that would serve the life that I want to live.
And are you doing this, is this completely online? Is this in person, or both, or what?
It's online.
It's all online.
It's virtual.
Okay.
One-on-one meetings that I do with therapists are completely, online. And I prefer it that way. It gives me more flexibility.
Right.
Yeah.
One of the questions I ask, and I think I know a lot of people respond to this and get a lot out of it, is kind of asking my guests about, kind of initial clinical errors they made and what they learned from that. What would you share with us in terms of that?
Great question. You know, I can't think of, a specific moment of an initial clinical error. That doesn't mean that I didn't make them, of course, but I think at this stage in my career as a therapist, what stands out to me is that I think I came out of my master's program kind of arrogant, I kind of really resting on the head knowledge that I had about theories and wanting to do those things.
Right.
And I think that's an error, in and of itself. I don't know that you can not do that. I think it's natural to feel confident when you have new knowledge and you've been sitting in that knowledge for several years as you study. But I would say that really, as you grow and you're in the developmental stages as a therapist, you realize that's an error, that it really comes down to being with people and listening and knowing who they are and using that knowledge, but not doing that knowledge to them, if that makes sense.
It does. Yeah. I mean, as you're saying that, I'm like, nodding my head here because that's, and I often talk about that. That was a big error I had, when I got to graduate school. I went to graduate school as a kind of, quote unquote, older, later student. I think it was like 35 or whatever. And, I kind of had been in therapy and really got a lot out of therapy and kind of like thought I had that under control, So all I wanted was like, okay, what book do I need to read? What workshop do I need to? I thought that just that was going to like do it for me. And I just had it wrong. It was like completely opposite. So how did you said a little bit just through training, but were there any specific landmarks or landmines along the way for you where you like realized, okay, wait a minute, I can't just try to fit this square peg in a round hole. There's something else going on here. What was that process for you like?
An early client comes to mind where there was a lot of trauma in her history. And, when I first started working with clients, I did a genogram with every client, but I didn't necessarily share that genogram with the client. It wasn't an intervention. It was more for me. It's an easy way for me to see the history. But with this particular client, I had been preparing her for us to do a genogram together that she could see her family patterns. And I put it up on a big whiteboard as we did it, and it became very overwhelming for her. And I realized through that session that I needed to go even slower than what I had been doing with her. And so I think that stands out to me as a lesson for me in that knowledge can really be hurtful to our clients. Because to me at the time, I won't say it was just a genogram. It wasn't. I've been working with her for several years. But it was still information. It wasn't and I had gone through the family of origin process, but, still, it's easy to get to a point where you detach it somewhere and you see it as, again, just something that you're doing and not as someone's whole life. And so, I think early as I worked with clients, I just began to see those glimpses and I listened to them. It wasn't just, oh, I see that and I'm the expert here. But no, I think I just was sensitive to them because that's where personality comes in, and also, it's the skills that you developed as a human being, as a person, even pre-therapist training. I think some of my tendencies allowed me to, I guess, respond appropriately and lovingly.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great example. This idea of how to kind of titrate information, and for you as someone who kind of swims in those waters, it's just who you are and what you do and what comes so easily. And was it that you moved too quickly, or presented too much information at once?
I think it was too much at once.
Yeah.
And I think it was also the history itself, like the facts of the family, and and also the taking for granted that because I understood my context, that the client did too. That there was a lot of information that came out that hadn't been thought about in years. So I think I moved too quickly in that scenario, and there's so many lessons. I mean, I think that we are able to take away a lesson from every session, and many lessons, perhaps even from every session. It's just a matter of how do we give heed and really integrate those lessons. Is there a process for that?
What in terms of the work you do and working with therapists and kind of, I don't know, maybe holding up a light to illuminate where they are in their whole life and process. And from your experience within that realm, is being a therapist in today's world, is it different? What does it mean? What are you seeing? What are you hearing?
That's a great question.
I mean, let me actually give you kind of a second part to that.
Sure.
Are people leaving the field? I've heard from a number of people that people are, leaving the field and becoming coaches.
Yeah, that's yes. A lot of therapists want to be coaches, and I say that because of. I have a post on my blog about this, how to ethically integrate coaching as a licensed therapist. It's like one of the most read blog posts that I've ever written. I get so many comments and emails about this. A lot of therapists want to become coaches. I think my perspective is that there are those therapists who say, why would we want to become coaches? We're therapists. We have a distinct profession. And then there are those that feel restricted by the state license and want to expand their business beyond state lines. So I think some therapists are leaving the profession, but I don't think in general it's a big issue. There's still lots of therapists new therapists going to training and going into the field, whether it be, counseling, marriage and family therapy, social work, etc. Your original question about what does it mean to be a therapist, that's a tough one for me, because I think there are a lot of therapists who are really focused on being in private practice and building a business, and I don't mean to say they're not focused on their clients. I'm just saying that their mentality is they're also business owners. There are other therapists who are really, really, who aren't so interested in being business owners, but are more interested in the clinical work, where they are writers and they develop theories and they work with specific populations and those kinds of things. But, really, I see being a therapist as being... I guess I should say I can't categorize it into being a profession, although of course it is a profession, but it's unique in that we can take our skills everywhere we go. And I don't mean to say that we should be doing therapy with, the person at the coffee shop. I mean to say that our skills allow us to build connection and to lead and to function in a variety of roles.
Yeah. It's interesting to me. I think talking to yourself and talking to other people and just learning about why people get into this field, and I think for newer clinicians, I think I know a lot of them. A lot of people get into this field because they want to help. They want to heal. They want to fix. And that whole process, I think, is important to look at, because I think a lot of clinicians have to define that early on. Why they're doing this work. As someone who's, are you going to be working with what year of students are you going to be working with?
It's a master's program, so graduate students.
Okay. What are your thoughts on that? This whole idea of why people get into this field. To help, to heal, to fix, to cure, to take away the pain, and
Yeah, perhaps. Perhaps. I mean, I think for a while, I think I did generalize that therapists, at least in my mind, I generalized that therapists probably had a certain personality type or certain wounds or maybe even certain skills. But being in touch with so many therapists, I don't necessarily think that's true anymore. And I'm not familiar with the research on what commonalities we have as people. However, in the program where I'll be teaching, we'll be helping therapists go through that family of origin exploration. And I think that the purpose of that is to help you be in touch with that. It's to help them, it's to help those new students think about that as they enter the profession, for it to not catch them by surprise later, because that process really does help you figure out, okay, who are you and what motivates you and what might be a surprise in the future.
Right. All right. So let's talk about your website in terms of what's on there, how people can work with you and so forth.
Sure. There's familytherapybasics.com, and there I have a lot of free resources. There's a free library there, and mainly blog posts on therapy, lifestyle, and business topics for therapists. And then I also have the refreshtherapistnetwork.com, and that is, the home for the community that I've been building for several years. And so there you can find information on how to join the free Facebook group. And I also host a book club, and then I have a membership also for therapists, where it's similar to yours, Guy, where I have a monthly master class and monthly calls and support and information for therapists who are interested in blending their training with their passion and really living refreshed as people who identify as a therapist.
Okay, awesome. So that's the Refresh Therapist Network and the Family Therapy Basics. Obviously, I'll have all this linked up at the show notes page at the Trauma Therapist Podcast, of course. All right, and how about a go-to book recommendation?
Wow.
whether therapy related or not.
Let go.
And if you don't have one now, you can shoot one to me and I can put it up later.
One of the books that I read in one of the first semesters in my master's program that really was helpful at the time is called Healing for Damaged Emotions by David Seamans. So that I would say that is in the same sort of theme that we've been talking about.
Okay.
So that's one suggestion.
Okay. Healing for Damaged Emotions. Okay. And I'll have that linked up at the page here also. All right, Ely. Awesome talking to you. I want to thank you so much for taking the time to do this, and good luck in New York.
Thanks so much. It's been my pleasure.
All right, guys, this episode is sponsored by Brighter Vision. Are you looking to grow your practice this year? If so, you have to check out Brighter Vision. As the worldwide leaders of therapist website design, Brighter Vision has helped thousands of private practices create a professional online brand that attracts the type of clients you love working with. With Brighter Vision, you get a website that looks like you spent thousands of dollars, but it only costs less than $2 per day. And it's not some cookie cutter template that you'll spend hours trying to put together. Instead, when you sign up with Brighter Vision, you have a team of designers who custom build you a website that's unique to you and your practice, with the goal of filling your calendar with the types of clients you do your best work with. And the best part, Brighter Vision is having their biggest sale of the year right now. When you sign up anytime in January, you can discount your entire first year with Brighter Vision down to only $49 a month. That's a savings of $120 from their standard pricing. Head on over to brightervision.com/guy to learn more. brightervision.com/guy. Once again, head on over to brightervision.com/guy to get the discount of the year. CPTSDfoundation.org provides daily recovery support, live group calls, 365 days a year. All calls are led by trauma-informed advocates, authors, and highly respected practitioners in the field of trauma recovery. CPTSDfoundation.org helps survivors connect with others who've walked through the fire of abuse and are on a path toward healing. After working with thousands of survivors all around the world, they know how to help you escape the shame of abuse by connecting with like-minded individuals so you can finally feel like healing is possible. Stop isolating between therapy appointments. Getting re-traumatized with your current strategy is no longer necessary. Reach out to CPTSD Foundation today and discover the life-changing, daily, trauma-informed peer support you've been waiting for. That's cptsdfoundation.org.